Thank you for joining me on this week's solo episode. I'm Lysha Holmes, your host, and occasionally I do like to share with you some of my thoughts of my quarter of a century in R2R. And this week's episode is hopefully going to be helpful if you clicked on this, if you're experiencing challenges in what can only be described as an extremely challenging market, regardless of what your sector or industry or where you're listening to this. I have often said this year that I think 2025 has been one of the most challenging trading years as a recruiter in all of my history, and I've been recruiting since 1998. So I've tried to position it that these are 5 things that I do when I find the market extremely challenging, and probably more challenging than it has been previously. And the first thing sounds really obvious when I say it, but it's to go back to basics. Now, if you're listening to this and you're somebody who's still quite embryonic in their recruitment career, when I talk about the basics, I'm talking about really sticking to the process that you have been taught. So this is about understanding what your key performance indicators are, what your activity targets are, what you're being measured on, and sticking to that. So when I then refer to back to basics, this is understanding what those ratios look like. So if you are in an industry that requires a lot more jobs than candidates, i.e. if your candidate flow is really quite high, then you need to probably get more jobs. Then your activity needs to be focused around business development. It needs to be around client research. It needs to be around developing the existing client relationships, penetrating deeper within that client to engage with them on maybe an RPO basis. And obviously looking at other regions, other potential areas of revenue as well. So you could look at contracts if you're just a perm recruiter. So I think when I talk about back to basics, it's about stripping your desk right back and thinking about all the things that you have done to create revenue when the market is much more buoyant and much more free-flowing. So when I look at it from my desk perspective, it is the key things like that. It's ensuring I work on the ratio of each candidate that I'm working with that I believe has value and I believe is, somebody that's going to provide real commercial value to my clients. I will go out of my way to speak to at least 2 companies on their behalf because that's my ratio. That's what works well for me and my business. And I will then generate at least 2 interviews per candidate. And if I'm working on 5 candidates, that's 10 interviews a week. These are just example figures. I will then ensure that I'm engaging with at least 5 new companies a week, whether that be through sending them messages on LinkedIn, following them on social media, etc., or actually old-fashioned picking up the phone and actually dialing out. So I think don't be afraid to do that and go back to the basics and actually, think about all the mechanisms. So don't just be mechanical in what you're doing. Really think about the process and the areas that you can impact. And that really leads me on to the second point, which is being really thorough in everything that you do and controlling your controllables. So by that, I mean, don't assume or be complacent and ask more questions to your candidates, because what you don't want is to, work doubly hard to get a really strong candidate an interview and then find that you haven't asked them or challenged them on things like counteroffer. Are they applying to any other companies? What's going to stop them actually accepting an offer that you get for them? So I think it's, taking that first thing back to basics and then making sure that you're not being complacent or making assumptions about anything at any stage in the process. So at each time your touch points of your candidate calls and your client calls, you're asking to your client, for example, who else are you seeing in the process? What are your concerns at this stage? What does my candidate need to do to get to the next stage? What does my candidate need to do to get an offer from you? What will prevent you from offering the candidate? And then ensuring that you're asking questions like that to your candidates. What will stop you actually accepting this job? What will be the potential deciding factor between you resigning from your current job and accepting my offer? And asking really pertinent questions every stage of the process and not leaving anything to chance. And when I say asking these questions, I'm not talking about asking them on an email. I'm not talking about sending WhatsApps. I mean, I'm the WhatsApp queen. This is about actually having meaningful conversations, slowing that process down in terms of really unpicking everything to understand where your influence is in the process. The third thing is training and development. And I think when you're an experienced or seasoned recruiter, very often you think you know it all. You think you've completed recruitment. But I think that one of the things that's kept me very fresh in my market is that I've continuously looked at my own training and development, and I've ensured that each year I do something to elevate my education as a recruiter, as a leader, as a broadcaster, as a business owner. And I think that when there's a challenging market, a lot of companies scale back, unfortunately, on the areas that I think they should be doubling down on investing in. So maybe not being magpies and going for the shiny new AI and automation and tech, but actually thinking about the skills and attributes of each of the people that they have in the business. So for you as a recruiter listening, or as a leader listening, thinking about what can I do to enhance my learning. Now, if you're in a business that has got a very limited budget, which we all have to be very compassionate to leaders, because everything, the cost of living has impacted company owners too, is what can you actually gain in terms of resources for free? And obviously with podcasts, you're listening to this now. There's so much e-learning out there. There's so much available to you, whether it's an old-fashioned book, whether that's a mindset book, it's performance enhancement, whether it's actually looking at your industry itself. Are there journals you can be subscribing to? Whether it's getting out into networking events and actually speaking to the people in your industry, it's a brilliant way to learn. But actually having an objective to it, not just going for cup of tea. It's actually going into those environments to actually achieve something in terms of your learning. So I want to be at this point and then get to this point. I think the fourth thing is ensuring you're making time every day for your well-being. And for me, that starts first thing in the morning because then it's done. Nothing else can stop it happening. I think the problem I see is that if I were to do it at lunchtime or at the end of the day, as we all know, recruitment can be very reactive. My reservation is always, if I haven't done it first thing, then it's possible I'll get distracted or, something else will take priority. So I think making time for your own personal well-being from a physical, emotional and spiritual level, whatever that looks like. It could be an early morning dip, it could be a walk, it could be a sauna, it could be the gym, it could be yoga, whatever it is that you feel gives you that time in the day, every single day. It ensures that you're releasing those hormones that will get you through whatever the stressful situation is. And I think it underpins everything in terms of how we then behave and act with each other. And I think the final thing is something that we have always been very proud of it in my business at Qui Recruitment, is getting out and meeting clients. And I think if you were to ask me sort of my conclusion as to the whole narrative around AI in the last couple of years, and obviously that's not going anywhere, it's not changing, is that if you want to survive and thrive and really flourish in this evolution of recruitment, the best way for you to do that is to actually get out and meet clients. If you want to meet your candidates too, that's great. But I think it's really important to meet your paying customer, to understand their environment, to understand their challenges, to understand how you can contribute to their business performing better, to add to their strategy, their growth. And I think it needs to get talked about a lot more, that, it's not always viable if you run a global desk or a global business. But at the very least, you should be doing it on video. At the very best, if you can, coordinate a trip once a quarter, biannually, and get out and see as many clients as possible. We spend one day a week visiting 3 or 4 clients in a day. Anything more than that can be quite exhausting, to be honest with you, and then you're not performing to your best. But we try and get out and see them. These are existing clients and obviously they're new clients. And we go and see existing clients because things change all the time. And you'd be surprised how much activity you get from just being back in those environments. You get to see people that you've placed, which is always nice. But most importantly, you're building trust, you're building relationships. I hope you found these 5 tips useful. I don't think any of them can work in silo. I think each of them contribute to the better performance of you as a recruiter and as a recruitment leader and as a recruitment business. What do you think I'm missing? Do you think there's other areas that you think I should be doubling down on? Always interested to engage, and thank you for listening to this solo episode, and we look forward to sharing lots more with you in forthcoming seasons.